Yes, welcome everyone. Cannabis News with Joe Klare for June 15th, 2018. Presented as always by the Marijuana Times. Check us out at marijuanatimes.org. All the great writers, great articles, all the cannabis news and opinion you need about the community, industry, and beyond. marijuanatimes.org. Click that video tab as well to get all the episodes of Cannabis News. All of that can be found at marijuanatimes.org. And also check us out on Apple Podcasts. Search the Marijuana Times over there to get the audio-only version of the show. Today, we're going a little more in-depth than something we talked about last episode about a particular veto, recent veto in Colorado by Governor John Hickenlooper when it comes to public consumption or consumption in public places. When it comes to cannabis, of course. We'll talk about that. Also, Vermont legalization is about to take effect in Vermont next week, or next month, rather. Recreational legalization. We'll talk about that and the conflict that the recreational laws have with current medical marijuana laws in Vermont, and an odd story out of Southern California. It's a very long story. It's linked in the description of the video, as are all the stories that I talk about here on Cannabis News. We'll go into it a little bit. It's an odd story of highway robbery in California, quote-unquote legal highway robbery. I guess, that remains to be seen how legal it turns out to be. But first, Cannabis News is brought to you by Natureside. Check out their organic, all-natural pesticides, nature-side.com. Side is spelled C-I-D-E. Natureside. If you're a cannabis grower in a state where it's legal, you want to be regulatory compliant, you want to use regulation approved pesticides. You don't want to use harmful chemicals. You do want to grow safe and poison-free. You can do all of that with Natureside, nature-side.com, a proud sponsor of Cannabis News. As always, they are awesome. Like I said, before we get into those stories, I do want to tell you that we're on Vimeo. It's our major video platform now, vimeo.com/Marijuana Times X, or search the Marijuana Times on Vimeo. You can find Cannabis News there. Become a member of Vimeo. You can just sign up. It's easy, email, whatever. It's free. Like, share, comment on all of the videos. If you would do that, that would be awesome. Really, really help us out. And so go check us out. Vimeo.com/Marijuana Times X. This first story is by Jason Sander over at marijuanatimes.org. Colorado officials won't allow cannabis consumption in public establishments. Like I said, we talked about this story in last episode. We talked about a series of 3 vetoes of cannabis bills by Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper and how activists were up in arms about that. One was about the autism, people on the autism spectrum getting access to medical marijuana in Colorado. That was vetoed by John Hickenlooper. Also a bill about publicly traded companies and cannabis. What we're talking about today is the public establishment consumption, the so-called social use bill in Colorado. In defense of vetoing the bill, the governor trotted out the same tired argument that along with legal cannabis will come increase in traffic accidents due to impaired drivers. He said, quote, "We're concerned that marijuana use at consumption establishments could result in additional impaired or intoxicated drivers on our roadways." He wrote in a letter announcing the veto. The bill also poses public health risks. Allowing vaporization of marijuana in confined spaces poses a significant health risk for employees and patrons of consumption establishments. In other words, allowing public consumption in like a retail shop or a social use lounge, a club, whatever, is going to give a bunch of people problems because of the vapor, and then a bunch of stone drivers are going to go out and crash all over the roads, which is the basic thread of what he's talking about. And of course, John Hickenlooper made his money, a lot of money, off of alcohol sales. And of course, there's bars everywhere. You can go, you can drink a ton, you can get into a fist fight, you can go get in your car and drive away. Of course, all that's illegal, but it would be illegal to drive under the influence of marijuana as well, from a social use club or public establishment. There's really not an argument against marijuana. Whatever argument can be made against marijuana can be made against alcohol and bars. Of course, they bring up the lack of a breathalyzer for being able to tell if someone is impaired with marijuana. The thing of it is that, at least in my opinion, and again, I've said many times before, predicting the future, when it comes to cannabis, it's hard because there's no patterns, there's nothing to base it on. But I can't really see a world of legalization, nationwide legalization in various states, whatever, that won't eventually include public use areas. Tourists. If you can't smoke in public and you can't smoke in most hotels and other places like that, tourists that come to a state that has legal marijuana, they really have nowhere to use their marijuana. And also, it's there's so many reasons. Like Jason points out in the story, some landlords don't allow smoking or whatever or marijuana use in their building. There's many reasons that people would need to have a place to come and use cannabis safely. They can't be their home or can't be a hotel or whatever. I think these places are inevitable. That remains to be seen. Maybe I will be completely wrong about that. Maybe though, 10 years from now, that'll be something that people look at you and you say it, and they look at you and you're like, what? Why would you do that? We have, this, and this, and this takes care of that problem and whatever. But the tourism problem is going to be a huge one because most hotels are not going to allow marijuana use. Actually, obviously, Airbnb and things like that, people will allow use. Some landlords allow use, but there's going to be a need for the social use areas. I think that the pressure of that need and the pressure of that demand is eventually going to force the law. But for now, in Colorado, is not forcing the law in that direction. Even Hickenlooper, like I said yesterday, he admitted he may be overly cautious, but this is experiment, one step at a time, and you know the drill. It's very, very slow going, but public use, public consumption, public use areas, social clubs for marijuana, I do think are in the future of legalization. But I think it's one of those things, one of those ancillary things that have to be fought for after legalization. Legislature's not going to put that in the bill. Ballot measures not going to have that in the bill for the most part. If they are, legislature's probably going to kill it anyway, as they have in various states. So it'll be something that'll be an improvement upon legalization. Once legalization is established, then when you go into the improvements of legalization, then you have, things like the social use clubs. They'll probably start in Denver. So far, I don't think that anyone's been approved to do that in Denver, but the law was passed, I believe, last year. Whenever it was, the law in Denver that allowed for social use clubs. It'll be slow going in the beginning, but when people see that it's not really a big deal and the sky is not falling, then it'll be a more frequent occurrence. At least, with my predictive powers, that's what I'm giving you. The show's free, so you can't complain. You get what you pay for. If I'm completely wrong, well, you get what you pay for. This next story is from BurlingtonFreePress.com. New Vermont, excuse me. New Vermont marijuana law leaves medical patients with conflicting rules. Next month, Vermont will throw off restrictions on adult marijuana use, leaving thousands of Vermonters who already use the drug for medical purposes, some 6,000 Vermonters, in a somewhat awkward situation. Vermont will have two conflicting sets of marijuana laws on the books on July 1st. That doesn't seem like the way to do things, but it's what they're going with. The legislature has failed to clarify how the two sets of rules will interact. Even minor updates died this year when Governor Phil Scott vetoed a bill for unrelated reasons. Really on the ball there in Vermont. Adults who are at least 21 years old will be allowed to possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana plus an unlimited harvest from homegrown plants. A separate law limits medical marijuana patients to 2 ounces with no exceptions for harvested marijuana. The general public will be able to plant cannabis outdoors as long as the growing space is enclosed and the property owner is given permission. Patients are allowed 3 additional immature plants, and they're supposed to keep all of their plants indoors. So you're allowed to grow recreational marijuana outdoors, but if you're growing for medical reasons, it has to be indoors. Yeah, I can't see any, problems that's going to cause, including the 1 ounce versus 2 ounces thing. What's going to be cops continuously saying, well, you're a medical patient, or are you not? Well, let's check this checklist. If you're not a medical patient, if you are a medical patient, we're going to go with this checklist. We tried to update that, said Senator Dick Sears, Democrat from Bennington, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee in Vermont. He said, quote, "It is what it is." Spoken like someone who's really gotten things done. It is what it is. Patients who are allowed to be younger than 21 years old can buy their marijuana from a dispensary, but adults and the general public will have no legal way to buy marijuana in Vermont. So recreational patients or recreational consumers have to be 21 and they have no place to buy it, but medical users can be younger than 21 and they do have a place to buy it. Another conflict that I'm sure will cause no problems down the road. We need to figure out how to have two systems, said Representative Ann Pugh, a Democrat from South Burlington. She's chairman of the House Committee on Human Services. Or for that matter, why do we need to have two systems? It really doesn't seem necessary. Obviously, if you have two different sets of rules, you have to have two systems. But if you have the same rules, maybe medical marijuana patients are allowed to grow outdoors like recreational patients. Maybe you can, make the selling more uniform. You can the restrictions, the age restrictions, you can make them more uniform. There's a lot of fixes that are going to need to happen in Vermont. It's going to be slow going, to say the least. But it's better than prohibition. I mean, for whatever problems it's going to cause in the next months or years, I guess it could be years in the case of Vermont, unless they really get this stuff hammered out in the legislature next year or later this year or whenever. I think they're done this year. So next year, I don't know. Whenever they meet again, they're going to have to figure it out. Because like I said, it's going to be just a bunch of cops, checking different checklists, and there's going to be problems. There's going to be wires crossed. There's going to be cops that don't know the law. They're going to apply this law, and this law should be applied. And I predict, again, this has been a prediction show so far. I predict we're going to see some stories out of Vermont that these conflicts are causing problems. Again, it's unnecessary. It's not medical marijuana and recreational marijuana are not that different. The only real difference is that children should be able to use medical marijuana with their parents' permission and, with the advice of their doctors or whatever. Other than that, for those over 21, it should be the same. So the same limits, raise it to the higher limit, the same restrictions, whatever. The only difference obviously is for medical marijuana, you have to have a recommendation or whatever. And I understand, the way that some medical marijuana patients use their medicine. Maybe they need more. Maybe they need more limits for them. I'm not a big fan of limits. I think, whatever limits medical marijuana patients should be able to have, recreational patients or consumers should be able to have. I don't see why, if it's okay for medical patients to have more, just make it more for recreational as well. Very easy. But again, maybe not so easy, at least so far in Vermont. This last story is from kqed.org. Again, as I said, these stories are linked in the description of this video, as are all stories that I talk about. This is a really interesting one. It's also very long, so if you want to go read it, I would highly suggest that. It's from the California Report. Highway robbery, drivers allege Rohnert Park police illegally seized cannabis and cash. And there are, apparently this happened quite a bit. This focuses on Rohnert Park Police Department Park Department of Public Safety Officer. Is that what they call their police? The Rohnert Park Department of Public Safety. This is the police. It's the police. Joseph Huffmaker, and focuses mainly on him and his partner, Sergeant J.C. Tatum. Apparently there have been 9 drivers total who say a group of officers from the city conducted pretextual traffic stops, those that enabled authorities to detain suspects for investigation of other matters, with the goal of unlawfully seizing marijuana and cash. 4 people allowed us to share their stories publicly, while 5 others would tell us about their encounters only if we agreed not to name them. They feared police retaliation. So basically, these cops are pulling people over, taking the marijuana, cash, whatever they have, that these people are transporting legally because it's California. The first story they tell is this guy who's taken he had a whole briefcase, all of his papers and everything. He was taking 47 pounds of marijuana to a dispensary. He was delivering it. It was all very legal in California. But these cops stopped him, took his stuff, never charged him. A year and a half later, never charged him. And there are many stories like that. Their stories suggest a pattern of questionable and potentially illegal stops and seizures over the past 3 years by officers from a small city along a major marijuana transportation corridor. The city of Rohnert Park said in a statement that its police officers, quote, joined other law enforcement agencies in drug interdiction efforts along Highway 101, seeking drugs including methamphetamines, opioids, cocaine, ecstasy, and marijuana. But the city says it ceased most interdiction efforts related to marijuana in 2017. Report issued by the California Attorney General that showed that from 2015 to 2016, the Rohnert Park Department of Public Safety, aka the police, received more than $1 million in seized cash. The Sonoma County District Attorney received almost $200,000 from assets seized. Tatum was responsible for much of that asset forfeiture windfall to his local department. In 2015, the mayor publicly recognized him for his drug prevention work. Tatum thanked the city council for allowing him the opportunity to, quote, fight the war on drugs. But Tatum has another reputation. A growing chorus of defense attorneys say he's a rogue cop. He's being sued for unlawfully taking a man's cash, and he has a documented history of dishonesty on the witness stand. When I say highway robbery, I really mean it. Sonoma County Defense Attorney Isaac Schwager said, Officer Tatum has been involved in dozens of questionable traffic stops, both above and below the Mendocino-Sonoma County line, where he seized marijuana farmers' product and or their cash, and given them no receipt and no criminal charges were ever brought. Now Tatum and his partner, Joseph Huffmaker, are under investigation by the city of Roanoke Park. They are both on leave, according to their attorney. And that's the key when it comes to all this, is no charges were filed. That it just screams, hey, we took this for no reason. It's not really a crime what you did. We're just going to keep this money, though, and the weed. We're going to keep the marijuana, and we're going to keep the money, but you really didn't do anything wrong because we're not going to charge you with it. Because obviously if you were, a big marijuana trafficker and had 47 pounds of marijuana, well, we would bring some charges. But apparently not. No charges. Which, like I said, it's like putting a big red flag on it that says this is just for the purposes of theft. Now, if they brought charges, well, then they can say, well, it's evidence and, of a crime. But there's no crime. There's no crime charged. So why is it gone? This guy at the beginning of the story, he still hasn't got his marijuana back. 47 pounds of marijuana. He says a year's salary, a year money for him. Gone. They just took it. Like I said, very interesting story. Go check it out. It's linked in the description of this video. And, good reporting. Legalization. There's gonna be a lot of stuff like this. This legalization is not a magic wand. It's going to stop a lot of this, especially things like asset forfeiture. So we got to keep on it. Keep spreading the word, spreading the news, getting the information out there. That's what we do here at Cannabis News at the end of the week. Now your weekend can start. Thank you for checking us out. Thank you for spreading the word about Cannabis News on Vimeo, Apple Podcasts, all of that. Thank you to Nature Side, nature-side.com. They're organic, all natural pesticides. They are a proud sponsor of the show. Make sure makecannabisgreatagain.com. Go get the swag. Help with legalization. Get this dope hat that I'm wearing. Makecannabisgreatagain.com. There's other stuff there as well. And of course, check us out on marijuanatimes.org, or simply search the Marijuana Times on your various social media networks or Google and all of that. Thanks, everybody, for another awesome week. We'll see you next time on Cannabis News.